Welcome back to Eatsy, where if we can make homemade dumplings, then so can you. In this video, we're also going to be showing you two different ways to cook your dumplings. The first one is the fried method, and we're also going to be boiling them. We're also going to show you a whole bunch of different ways to wrap them. Similarly to making pierogies, if you're making a large amount for a large family meal, it can quickly become a family activity as individuals all help each other to make a massive pile of dumplings to have. You can eat your dumplings on their own as a meal by themselves, or as a secondary dish to a larger meal like we did here. Here we serve them alongside our steamed fish and our smacked cucumber, and you can find the videos for both of these dishes in our playlist. We're going to be making our own dough in this video, but if you don't want to do that, you can always use store-bought wrappers like these ones here. We're also going to be making a very large amount of dumplings, about 100 of them. So if you don't need that many, just reduce our math accordingly to get the numbers that you want. So we're going to be starting with 1,000 grams of flour, which is about 35 ounces. To the flour, you'll gradually add about 500 grams, or 17.5 ounces of room temperature water. So in total, we're going to be making about 1,500 grams of dough. Each dumpling needs about 15 grams for each wrapper, so that means we're going to be making about 100 dumplings in this video. So if you don't need 100 of them, just divide the numbers of the quantities of our ingredients so that the numbers suit your needs. When you've gradually added all your water to the dough, form it into a ball, and then cover it with a lid to let it rest while you prepare the rest of the ingredients. Next, let's talk about the meat. The ratio of meat to vegetables for our dumplings is about 1.5 pounds of meat and 2 pounds of vegetables. So that's 680 grams of the meat of your choice and about 900 grams of vegetables. Auntie and Uncle always dice their own meat from a pork loin when they make dumplings, but if you want to, you could get some ground pork or ground meat of your choice as well. Using diced meat rather than ground meat just makes the dumplings a little more pleasant to eat. Put the meat of your choice into a large bowl that you can mix the vegetables and seasoning into. Next, in a medium-sized pan, we're going to add approximately 100 or 150 grams of oil. To the oil, we're going to add one medium-sized sliced red onion and Sichuan peppercorns to your preferred preference. If you want it zingier, add more. If you want it more mild, add less. If you wanted to, you could skip the peppercorns entirely and just rely upon the flavor of the ginger, which we'll add next. This is about 25 grams of finely sliced ginger. And lastly, you'll add in about 2 to 3 sliced green onions. Don't worry if your pan is a little full, the vegetables will cook down in the oil. You'll let all the onions cook together until they turn golden brown. Then you can use a sieve to separate the oil from the onions. Make sure you save the oil because it's going to be added to the pork later. Bring your onions over to a cutting board and finely chop them up. You want them to be very fine, so when you think they're almost done, make sure you continue chopping for a little while longer. Next, we're going to do the same thing with a bundle of celery. Cut the celery into thin strips, then dice up those strips, and then continue dicing the diced pieces until they're much smaller than they were. Though they are going to be cooked down during the cooking process, nobody wants to find a big chunk of celery inside their dumplings. We're going to do the same thing with 4 or 5 green onions. Continue chopping them up until they look almost like mush. So now let's start combining everything in with the meat. We're going to start with 1 teaspoon of white pepper. Then we'll add 1 tablespoon of salt, a tablespoon of oyster sauce, half a tablespoon of dark soy sauce, and 2 tablespoons of light soy sauce. Then we can add in our super chopped green onions. And remember I told you to save the oil from when we cooked our onions? You can pour that in with the meat as well. Stir all that together, and then we're going to add in our super chopped fried onions that we made before. Then we can add in 1 egg, and then finally our super diced bundle of celery. Mix everything together thoroughly. Now we're going to head back to our dough and start making our dumpling wrappers. Because we made so much dough and are planning to make so many dumplings, Auntie is going to cut her dough ball into 4 pieces to make it easier to work with. While she's working with one of the dough balls, she's going to keep the lid on the bowl covering the other 3. This will ensure that the dough doesn't dry out. Firstly, she's going to take a dough ball and form it into a donut. She's going to continue rolling the donut and pulling it apart until it makes a long tube. Then we're going to roll the tube on our work surface until it gets to be about 1.5 to 2 inches thick. Then, starting at one end, Auntie's going to pull little chunks off of it. These little chunks are going to turn into the dough wrappers. Each one needs to weigh about 15 grams. The technique Auntie uses to make her dumplings is to roll over part of the dough ball, rotate it, roll over the next part, rotate it again, roll over the next part. Using this technique allows her to make a mostly round dumpling wrapper. Auntie and Uncle Fred have just made so many dumplings over the years, they just do it at lightning speed. So each dumpling wrapper is about 15 grams of dough, and for each dumpling you're going to use about 15 grams of filling. So your whole dumpling altogether is going to weigh about 30 grams. So we were making 100 of these things, right? So Auntie took the opportunity to show us some of the designs that she knew how to make. This is the first one, and the traditional one that she usually uses. You squish it in from one side, and then pinch it in from the other side. Then she puts the bottom against her middle finger and squishes it in her hands. This makes a dumpling that looks like a little purse. For this next one, she accordion folds one side of the dumpling wrapper while keeping the other side flat. This makes something that looks like a seashell. For this one, she alternates folding in one side and then the other of the dumpling. It creates something that looks like a leaf. And then there's me. Because we had 100 of them to make, I decided I was going to help and figure out if I could make a cool looking dumpling. I found that the easiest way for me is to make something that looks like a little tortellini. I just pinch the top closed and then fold it in the sides into a little tortellini shape. And if you're finding any of those too difficult, we also have this method of putting a little bit of the filling in between 2 of the dumpling wrappers. Squish the edges together and then go around the edge, folding it over itself. I think this one looks like it should be like a little apple tart or something. Like it's a dessert rather than a dumpling. And eventually we ended up with a whole pile of different shapes of dumplings. We then created an assembly line where Auntie and I were making the raw dumplings while Uncle was cooking them for us over at the stove. First we're going to need 80 grams of water, and to the water we're going to add 4 grams of cornstarch. Mix your water and cornstarch together very thoroughly. Now let's head over to the stove where we can click the like and subscribe buttons. In a large, moderately oiled pan, we're going to start laying out some of the raw dumplings. You want to make sure that you leave a little bit of space between each of them so that they don't accidentally cook together. Then we're going to pour in our water and cornstarch mixture. Put the pan over high heat until the water starts to boil, and then reduce it down to medium, and cover your dumplings with a lid. The water and cornstarch mixture is to ensure that your dumplings turn golden brown faster, and so that they'll become a little bit more crispy. Keep a close eye on your dumplings, and when they have a golden brown bottom, you can remove them from the pan. The other method of cooking your dumplings is to boil them. Add some water to a large pot or wok, and bring the water up to a light boil. When you add your dumplings to the water, it will reduce the temperature. So let the water come back up to a boil and then cook the dumplings for 4 minutes. During the heating process, make sure you lightly stir them just so that they don't accidentally stick together. You'll know they're definitely done when they're all floating on the surface of the water. Then you can use a sieve to scoop the dumplings out of the water and onto your serving plate. And there you have it, homemade dumplings that you can either fry or boil. If you tried this recipe out for yourself, let us know down in the comments which cooking method you preferred. If you serve your dumplings as part of a larger meal, make sure you check out our 5 Chinese side dishes video in our playlist. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like, and we release a new video every week, so make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And as always, thank you so much for watching.